Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban, and we're joined today by Brenda Batista. She's the founder of a company called Inspiring Company Culture. She is an entrepreneur, a management consultant, an industrial engineer like myself, and she is an attorney. And so over the last 25 years, Brenda has been at the helm of many high-performing teams, creating a company culture that inspires employees to bring their best and to embrace their leadership prowess. She's a certified Six Sigma Black Belt. She's a project management professional, and she's a Five Voices System certified trainer. So Brenda, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. You have a lot of in your background of varying degrees and experiences. So with all of that, I'm really curious about what you would consider to be your favorite mistake.
My favorite mistake, yeah, I think actually it's a wonderful question because it does make you reflect on all of them. And hopefully you have them. So, because if we don't have them, we're not learning anything.
Right.
But I think one that at the time felt like catastrophic, but it's my favorite mistake because I think it was the origins of, wait a minute, why is this happening and how can this be? So it's a story of giving somebody information they had asked for and being truthful, and how that ended up being a mistake. And everybody around me, they're like, oh my gosh, why did you tell them that? So the story is that I had just started a role as a program executive with a little bit of sales responsibility. So I just kind of stepped out of project management into this kind of dual role, and was meeting with executives at the client site.
Mhm.
And I had a mentor who was there onboarding me and so forth, but the client had asked, how much is it going to cost for us to do all of our interfaces? So can you go find out from the people who take care of that and bring that back and let us know what that cost is? So I brought it back, and the price was $1,000,000. So and I said it. I was like, this is exactly how much it is. They were looking at your customization and everything, and that's the price. And so why it was a mistake is because I just said it. And one of the executives, literally, I thought his head was going to pop off. He looked like those cartoons, when they turn red and you see the steam start to rise out of the top of their head. He just got so beat red. If steam could pass through the top of his head, it would. He stood up. He started shaking the chair. How dare you bring me that number? Did you even bother to pre-negotiate with yourself, basically is what he's saying. We're partners. This price is way too high. How dare you say such a thing to me? I mean, it's just, his reaction was it was just so, animated, because I guess is the right word.
And it sounds
So
like that
animated.
surprised you.
It
Yeah.
absolutely surprised me
Right.
because I was being honest. So my mistake was, which is weird to say this, my mistake was being honest and just giving him the information, being very factual. Being an engineer, right? You ask for a number, we give you a number. That's what it is. I don't see what the problem is. That's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
But he got so, like I said, animated, and then literally left the meeting with one last kind of shout back. Now I'm going to have you fired for this.
Ooh. Wow.
But yeah, I'm just shocked. It was like, how do you recover for something like that?
So what
What
happened?
I so so afterwards, well, the chief information officer who was still sitting there, he's like, well, yeah, it's a little higher than he was much more reasonable, right? He's like, this is a little higher than what we'd expected. So there's been you didn't circulate this, right? I said, well, no, that's the branch who takes care of it. This is what they said. They said, well, do you think you could see maybe if there's something we could do? Yeah, sure. My mentor said nothing. He's sitting in the corner, said not a word. And we come out of the meeting, and he's like, yeah, why did you tell him that was the price? Because
I
that's the
mean,
price. I mean, it was just that,
somebody had given you that number, I'm guessing, or it was a
right.
standard price.
It was the price that people had, the experts that would have to do the connections, had come up with.
Mhm.
And it was based off of the work, because they went through and did an inventory of interfaces and figured out, yeah, this is what it's going to cost. And some of them are customized because you guys didn't take what we said. You didn't just use what we said, right? You did a lot of customization. It increases the price. That's what it is. And it's kind of it's like a negotiation. It's our first offer. This is going to come out. But it was just why that was a mistake is at that moment, I felt all of that. You feel that heavy weight of, oh, I'm just starting something new. I'm a little outside my comfort zone to begin with because I'm in this new role. And all of this is coming back. I might actually lose my new role. I mean, I've been in it for a few weeks and it might go away. Oh, what did I get myself into? What is happening here? And is this guy really going to get me fired? And so what my takeaway was actually quite a few things. First is how words influence how people think and how you receive them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing, there were no adjectives added to it, like, oh, it's $1 million. Can you believe it? I didn't say anything like that. I just said, this is a very bad of fact.
Right.
But then also how culture influences that, because this person as an executive was setting the tone for the organization where it was okay. His behavior was okay. He never apologized for that.
That behavior of threatening you, basically, flying off.
Yes,
and that acceptable.
And that was okay. And that everybody tiptoed around him. And being the new person, I didn't know that you're supposed to tiptoe around this person because we're all people, right? I just kind of took it at face value. We're all here, we're sitting around the table. You ask me a question, I give you an answer. Right. You didn't like the answer, that's okay. You can not like the answer, but we can talk about it. There was no talking to him, right? It was just, I'm out of here, and he took off. So that really, it really sets the tone. And it was like, and then personally, it's like, well, wait a minute, I didn't do anything really wrong here.
Right.
I was just sharing information. But what about my sharing? What about my communication was a fail in this instance? Because I wasn't understanding what it was. And like I said, my mentor wasn't very helpful either, because basically his response was, well, you shouldn't have told him the number. But then not give him an answer ever, that, upsets people too.
Right.
And so it was understanding that the relationship I had with that executive, being new, was transactional and not one built on trust yet. So he didn't trust that I went and did due diligence on his behalf and as an advocate for him. And so because of that, I couldn't get past, I didn't kind of earn his respect to say, oh, well, that's kind of high. Maybe we should talk about that. So he wasn't being reasonable because we didn't have that level. And I didn't have that level of influence with him yet because I was still new. So for me, it was a takeaway because I learned those things and how valuable all of that is. Whereas before, it's more of a technical person. You didn't really have to deal as much with that. But then I also started becoming a student of how that, the culture, the wording, the level of influence that you have with a team impacts how well you sustain the results.
Sure.
So every project is impacted by that. And I started to become a student of that, for myself, and then for others as I started working more and more with teams, more and more with executives. Oh, okay, this is something that has to come to awareness because it's very important to get it right. It's not going to be perfect, but to understand the dynamics here will help.
Sure. So, a couple of follow-up questions, or for one, I guess a comment. You're right that relationships matter and we need to build trust. I'd also like to think we shouldn't have to earn the right to not be yelled at and threatened. That should be, that we could have disagreements and someone can push back respectfully, regardless of how long we've known them, perhaps. So that's just sort of a comment. But the follow-up question is, well, so, first off, what was the resolution? Did they end up reaching an agreement to do those interfaces? Was there negotiation? How did that, before we talk about like your reflections and lessons learned of what you would or did do differently afterwards, how did I want to know the end of the story, at least
So
that scenario.
so the end of the story, yeah. So the end of the story is I went back to the division who gave me that number immediately. But it was like step number one. I called them and said, I gave your number. One of them is lukewarm and the other one is extremely upset. Um, kind of alert. Oh, which one? I had to tell them like, oh, great. Thanks for stirring the pot over there, newbie. But okay, so they were made aware and they're like, but that's the price. I said, well, they want to know if there's anything you could possibly do with that for them. And so they were able to come down a little bit on the price,
Mm-hmm.
but it still was good. It was pretty close to $1 million. And the client decided not to do it because of the pricing, but also realized just the number and the customizations, our kind of our best and final is this. If anything else, we'd be giving it away.
Right.
And and so they were like, nah, okay, never mind. We'll come up with a different workaround or something like that for what they wanted to accomplish. I'm like, okay.
So what was the impact then in terms of your work with that client or your work within the company you were employed by? Was there a negative effect, or was that something that passed?
It was something that passed. So after calling that division, I called my immediate supervisor. So look, this guy threatened he's going to call. And luckily, my boss knew me from before. So I was already in the company, but just switched positions. And she just started to laugh, really. She's like, really, what did he say? And I told her, she said, oh, such a drama king, right? So she just kind of brushed. She said, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. I know you're really upset now. I know how that feels, but it's okay. And I've got your back. So if anything happens, you've told me everything that, occurred and it will be fine. You'll be fine. The client, though, was very interesting because I guess I kind of earned a stripe in that and earned respect because I took his verbal, kind of verbal beating, I guess.
Yeah.
He immediately called the other executive and apologized to him. Said, sorry, I lost my cool and, everything. Within about 5 minutes, we were still in the meeting when he called the other person. It took him about a week.
To apologize to you.
Yeah, to come around and apologize. And it was a weird worded apology. It was like, yeah, I can see I kind of overreacted. I'm sorry. It took a while to build up.
Mm-hmm.
But our future kind of interactions, I knew then how he would interact or react to things. And of course, with system implementations, they're never perfect. There's always a hiccup.
So I'm thinking about the scenario. I mean, it seems like it would have been helpful. It seems like that the executive who got upset with you, that was known to behave that way, and it sounds like nobody gave you a heads up about that. Were there any lessons about sort of trying to get the lay of the land in terms of personalities when you were new in an engagement, or what were some other takeaways from? So again, I'm not excusing his behavior, or but
Right.
I'm just to at least be aware that that's a little bit of what you were walking into.
Well, no. So the company didn't. So I've worked with different companies that would actually have an influence map, and we would discuss it and say, "Hey, there's your executive team. This person loves us. We can do no wrong. They influence that person, and they're kind of lukewarm. But as long as the influence stays positive, we're good. This person hates us, So always be careful." We didn't have that, so they didn't really have that for me. So it was a little bit of trial and error, except for the salesperson who was coming off of the account definitely had his favorites in the client, right? So it was personality based, like, oh, he's the greatest person ever. Like, okay, well, how did you build that rapport? I just keep taking him out to dinner or lunch or whatever. It's like, nice. I don't have that, I don't have that budget. That's not what I can do. And he's like, oh, well, I just come in, sell them things, buy them stuff, and we're good. I actually have to tell them when the things aren't going well, right? So it's a little different, and that's he gave some heads up, but otherwise it wasn't. It was a lot of trial and error, and I'll say behavioral patterns that you notice in people, just generally speaking, right? Not a stereotype, but somebody who's in a certain position and who does certain things. You're like, oh, well, typically this person, it can be this way, and you're like, okay. So they're either going to prove my hypothesis true, or the engineer, right? The hypothesis is going to be true or false, and that's how I learned about that. But at the end, I think we came to a point where he respected me because I could maneuver through kind of his power moves, and he calmed down. I mean, we came to a point where we understood each other, the commonality between us,
Mm-hmm.
and it worked out okay.
I mean, it sounds like maybe there were also some lessons to be learned. You're making me think about couching bad news, or how to preface bad news to try to soften some of the blow, and whether it's a cost or a delay or some sort of bad news that we have to deliver either to our boss or to a client. Do you have any other thoughts about how to soften some of that blow around, like you said, undeniable fact? The answer is what it is, but setting somebody up to receive that information in a more constructive way.
Yeah, and I think the learning point there is still to be truthful, right? So not to lie, but to definitely think through, what am I asking them for? Like, how can they be part of the solution? So in the case of it's $1 million, well, what's their budget? Maybe their budget was $500,000. Okay, so what can we do? Can we prioritize? Can you help me prioritize that we can get some of this done? And if we got half of it done, will it get you the same result you wanted? Are you okay with extending the result time? So doing more of that kind of pre-negotiating with yourself for options, kind of, I'm going to say strategizing the discussion of not every scenario, because you certainly can't do that, but the best case, worst case, so that you're prepared for that. And, a couple in the middle. It's like, well, if I were them, what would work? What can I make work? And how can I, kind of present that information in that way? Like, well, $1 million is maybe out of reach. Is it out of reach for 2 years? Because is this a 2-year project instead of next quarter? Because you don't have it for next quarter. It's something like that. I think that really, really helps. And this, the more that you're honest with what's happening, because I've seen it on the other hand on projects where people are afraid to say anything, and then they hide things, right? They're like, oh, well, this element is really red, kind of your stoplight kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's really red, but we better not tell that executive it's red. Let's tell them it's yellow. Yeah, and in 2 weeks, is it good? Or next week is still going to be red? Or is it going to be redder than red?
That could blow up on you.
Right, because we probably should have told them something now. And what's the plan to fix it? Don't just let it hang there,
Yeah. Well, Brenda, can you tell us also about your company, Inspiring Company Culture? Like, what types of organizations do you work with, and what's your focus in working with them?
Yeah, so Inspiring Company Culture. So it actually, I think its origins started back from that conversation I'm talking about. And then how do you create a really high-performing and effective team? So I work with small to medium-sized businesses and a larger corporation, but it would be focused primarily on the team. How do you create the high-performing team? How do you know where you are, and how do you become better? And so that comes from communication. It comes from alignment, and make sure that we're all pulling in the same direction. We really want to be pulling in the same direction. Execution, so we're getting things done, and understanding our capacity to get work done. Mm-hmm. And so I work with teams to do all of those things so that we move forward and really become a place where people love working because they're heard and valued. So you shouldn't have somebody being worried they're going to have their head cut off for saying something that was kind of bad news, or a crazy idea. It's like, that no, we're not doing that. And that's a soft response. Having somebody just get ready to physically attack you is not okay.
Right.
And that's an extreme version. But I help teams not experience that, because even if you're not doing that, you could be doing something lesser that's making your team members feel that way. And then they just like, yeah, I'm not saying anything. They go into safety mode like a tortoise. You're going to hide a little bit and go, I just get my stuff done. So I really help teams get past that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the one good thing I could say about that executive that blew up at you is that at least you knew where he stood, where sometimes organizations can be a lot more passive aggressive in their response to bad news, which, as you were saying, drives people to start hiding problems and becomes really dysfunctional, as opposed to an environment, as I've talked with with some of my other guests here, leaders creating an environment where it is safe for people to talk about the real reality, whether that's a problem or a mistake, and to learn from those and to grow and to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the only way that, as a consultant, when you come in and you do a project, they hire you to be the hired gun. Get it done quickly and get out. But it doesn't, the results don't sustain. And that's because you don't engage the people. And so that's what I focus on. You got to engage the people, and they've got to see that this isn't extra work. This isn't just something to bother them. I'm bothering them for data like constantly. Why do you always need all this data? It is, I need it, but it's for you because you're going to sustain this longer and past me being here. It's for you. And I think we just do a really bad job generally as consultants getting those people in. We do the transition at the end. That last kind of cleanup part is like, yeah, knowledge transfer, 2 days. No, wait. This can't be accomplished in 2 days. And so this is, I'm going to say a fail prevention so that your results sustain over time.
Yeah, and that might be, you're making me think of one example of the type of bad news a consultant might have to deliver to a client where, like I said, the client wants to basically outsource the thinking or outsource the doing to a consultant. Here, just make it happen really quickly. When as a consultant, you sometimes have to push back. So, well, I think really the best thing that's going to lead to the best, most sustainable outcomes is to go a little bit more slowly and have me coaching you and the organization through it as opposed to doing it for you. Those tensions exist, and sometimes people don't like being told no. The quick and dirty, just have someone else do it approach might not be best. They might learn. They might end up making a mistake that maybe they end up talking about on this podcast. But
that's right.
those are difficult things to navigate. I would agree.
Absolutely. So that's what my company, that's what I focus on, is creating that team where people are heard and valued so they contribute more. And then businesses grow from that. I mean, there's a recent Gallup study that showed that teams right now are getting about 58% of their capacity because of this issue of people who don't feel comfortable speaking.
Oh, okay.
Their ideas aren't
from that
loss of productivity and the capacity is there to just start getting it from the team.
Yeah.
And if you think of an organization of multiple teams, you start multiplying that out for your expected value. Your expected value dwindles to nil. It's a greater issue, and I think it's not as easily quantified, so it's harder for people to get at. But it's certainly important. And then once you start getting them going in the right direction, we're very powerful.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brenda. Our guest today has been Brenda Batista. Her company is Inspiring Company Culture. You can find more information at www.inspiringcompanyculture.com. So, Brenda, thank you for sharing your reflections. From a scenario, and what it sounds like there were mistakes made all around. But thank you for sharing your reflections and what you learned and took away from that. So thank you for being a guest today.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. It's always good to reflect, as I said in the beginning. I think it's an awesome question. So thank you.